Welcome. This is Ignite Kingdom Talk. Make the marketplace the miracle place. Today's episode is a session from Ignite 23 featuring the Kingdom ROI Strategist, Eric L. Dunavant. Eric Dunavant is a serial entrepreneur, author, speaker, coach, and creator of the Kingdom ROI method. Through his work with families and business owners, Mr. Dunavant helps kingdom-minded leaders break free from the idolatry of the world's wealth-building systems and discover a new strategy for creating abundance with peace, intention, and lifetime and generational impact at the helm. Increase generational impact now. Take the free Kingdom ROI Accelerator course at ericl360.com. That's ERICL360.com. May your faith and hope be ignited afresh and anew right now in Jesus' name.
Oh, love you, man.
Love you.
Have fun.
Love you.
Hi, good morning. It is so good to be with you. Who here owns a business? All right, we got the business leaders in the house. Okay, so stay with me. Yeah, I need that. Thank you. Let's talk about business a little bit. If you think about your business, who here is thriving right now? You are thriving in business. Hi, come on, because there's some. Get your hands up high. All right, you're thriving, all right. Who here you're just surviving right now? Get a few of those too, right? We're just surviving. All right, so the rest of you, I'm gonna assume, are somewhere in the middle. All right, so what about your marriage? Let's shift this over to your marriage. Who here's thriving in your marriage? If your spouse is here, you can like, anybody here just surviving? You willing to raise your hand and say that? What about your relationship with your kids? Same question. Who here is thriving in your relationship with your kids? All right, you know my next question, right? Who here you're just surviving right now? Maybe you got the terrible twos or the teenage years, or right? All right, here's my next question. So we just kind of went through it. Who here was lying? No, seriously, if you'll raise your hand, I've got some books I want to give you, because if you're honest enough to tell me that, because like me, like I get in a crowd like this and I'm like, I want to look really, really good. So Russell and Chris, stand up. I've got a set of books. These are like books on kingdom principles and books on business that they're gonna hand to you if you will admit you were lying. All right, we got one right here. Go get him, go ahead, yeah. All right. What you have in your hands are you've got there's two things there. One is, there are 6 kingdom principles which I've really built that I live my life off of, and each one of these books, not necessarily all written by believers, have shaped my worldview from a kingdom standpoint. It's really interesting how God does that. But I want to turn the conversation just a little bit more serious, and I'm about to make you really uncomfortable. I just want you to be ready. Can we talk about your affair partner? Your affair partner. Can we talk about him? The one that like you cannot stop thinking about. The one that keeps you away from home. The one that even when you are home, distracts you from being connected. You're like, Eric, I don't have an affair partner. Yeah, you do. All of those things describe your business. You can't stop thinking about it. It keeps you away from home. And even when you are home, how many times, like me, I'm the one who's guilty, right? How many times do you find yourself pulling out your phone in the middle of a conversation to check your business email? If you were here last year, I shared with you an experience I had 4 years ago. It was March. In February, I had been on the road 20 of 28 days. And I was at an experience where a gentleman who has become an incredible friend of mine asked me the question, why do you hate your family? And I was crushed. Because what he exposed to me is that I was treating my business like an affair partner. I was showing more love and dedication to my business than I was showing at home. And so if we stop and ask this question of where we are and where we're going, the real question is like, do I recognize the fact that I am unintentionally putting my business ahead of everything else in my life?
We hope that you're enjoying this episode of Ignite Kingdom Talk. We'd like to take a minute to tell you about today's sponsor. Are you tired of supporting mobile providers that don't align with your values? Well, look no further than Patriot Mobile for a solution. With Patriot Mobile, you can support causes you believe in every time you make a call or send a text. They donate a portion of your bill to organizations fighting for the Constitution, religious freedom, our military and first responders, and the right to life. Not only does Patriot Mobile stand for your values, but they also offer nationwide coverage on America's largest 5G networks with plans to fit any budget. Plus, switching is easy. You can keep your current number and even your phone. Just visit patriotmobile.com or call 972-PATRIOT. That's 972-728-7468. Make a difference with every call. Switch to Patriot Mobile and join the mobile revolution. Thank you. Let's dive back in with Eric L. Dunavant at Ignite 23.
What I get the pleasure of doing is I get to work with families and businesses to help them avoid the unintended consequences of building wealth. And the unintended consequence that none of us are talking about is the fact that the world tells us it's okay. As a matter of fact, you're supposed to put your business ahead of your marriage. You're supposed to put your business ahead of everything else. And what are the unintended consequences of that? And what is that costing us? I mean, have you ever caught yourself asking kind of making these statements like, I'm doing it all for my family. When we make X amount of profit, I promise things are going to be different. Next year, I'm going to do things differently. I got completely exposed by my son, Austin. It was year 3, I told you it was 4 years ago. It was the Christmas right before that experience. And I kept telling him, hey, next year, buddy, I'm not going to travel so much. Next year, I'm not going to travel so much. Next year, I'm not going to travel so much. And he looked at me and said, Dad, next year's never coming, is it? What next year do you keep promising the people that you love the most that's really, truly, it's never coming? You're just lying to yourself. And you're lying to the people that you love the most. Here's what I'm going to tell you. Thriving or surviving or whatever, here's what I want you to know. You do not have a business issue. You have a marriage and connection issue. Period. I want you to say this with me. We're not going to leave without you. I do not have a business issue. I have a marriage and connection issue. Now, you're not convinced, are you? By the time we get done, I'm going to show you that the most important thing that you can do is actually invest in your marriage. You want better business results? You want better business outcomes? Do you actually know that starts at home? Everyone's give you a new business strategy. I'm not going to give you a new business strategy today. What I'm going to do is give you a new life strategy. Here's what I want you to understand. That my clicker's not working. Somebody will fix that soon. There we go, now it is. So, the world's measurement of success is ROI, it's return on investment. How do we know we did better last year? Well, let's look at your balance sheet. Let's look at how your sales performed. Are you up from where you were last year? Oh, well then, yeah, you had a great year. You know what the problem with return on investment is, especially when we think about it from our business standpoint? Return on investment is a message that can only be rooted in starting with fear. I'm sure this clicker works. It starts with fear. It would come up there. I can see it right here.
What's that?
Anyway, Fear, right? Fear, this idea of where you're sitting around and you're like, oh my goodness, what if we don't make that sale? What if a recession happens? Fear leads you then into scarcity. What if we lose our biggest client? What if that contract doesn't get renewed? What if our new product doesn't create the outcome? All I can think about is, what if it doesn't work? And scarcity now puts you into a mindset of protection and try to protect your business. It's all you can think about. You know what? Okay, so I know that we've got these things going on, so I'm gonna hire this consultant. Because this consultant right here, they're gonna help us 10x, and when they come in, then everything's gonna be better. We're gonna put this new strategy out. We've got this new product launch, and when this new product launch, then things will be better. And you're entirely focused on what the world thinks about how you should measure, and again, you turn your attention to the business. I'm just gonna ask you a simple question. How's that working for you? Here's what I know. Millions of dollars are made each year selling financial solutions without any regard to the long-term impact on the relationships of the people involved. I don't know if you know this or not. 50% of business exits are not voluntary. I grew up with this. My dad was a veterinarian. He was a really good veterinarian. He was not necessarily a great businessman, but he was a really good veterinarian. My dad and my dad ran the business. My mom stayed home with the kids. And they kind of worked in their own worlds. By the time I hit 7th grade, my parents separated because my dad had spent so much time on business, that's all he knew. And my mom was raising the kids. And then we buried my mother the day before I started my freshman year of high school. My dad came back home. But they weren't divorced yet, so all of her medical bills and everything else ended up on his doorstep. And 2 months before I graduated high school, my father filed bankruptcy. 50% of business exits aren't voluntary. You're like, hey, that won't happen to me. Really? Are you sure? The challenge is this, right? I mean, if we own a business, one of these days we hope to exit. I don't know about you, but a lot of business owners are like, that's my retirement plan, is the business. 75% of business owners don't have any kind of exit plan. They're not even thinking about it. If you own a business, I'm just gonna say one thing to you because I really wanna talk about something else today, but you start planning for your exit the day you open the door. You start preparing for what would happen if I'm not here tomorrow the day you open the door. Stop letting your ego get in the way that you're the only person that can do this. Man, if you were gone, somebody'd figure out how to do it tomorrow. It's not you. But here was the statistic that hit me the hardest. The divorce rate for married business owners is 10% higher than the general public. That says 48%. The divorce rate's actually been coming down. Everyone's like, Eric, I can't believe the divorce. I thought the divorce rate was 50%. No, it's actually been coming down, but the divorce rate for married business owners is 10% higher than the general public. Something's wrong. Are we gonna look it in the face? Are we gonna look at the fact and finally admit, I don't have a business problem, I have a marriage and connection problem? Let me show you what happens. So if we live a long, healthy life, it says that one person in a couple, the actuaries say, will live about 90 years. Actually, did not make it onto this slide, but marriage, a good long marriage, will last about 60 years. And you'll have your children at home for 18. Which means that the halfway point for marriage, if you're going to make it, is about the age 55. But the halfway point for having kids at home is only 36. So do we recognize the fact that what the world tells us is it's okay, and this is not, let me be very careful, this is not in every single family, but this is a lot where I see this happen, is one spouse goes and spends a lot of time running the business. And one spouse spends a lot of time raising the kids, and we go in two different directions for 18 years. And we wake up in 18 years as like, who are you? And I don't know if I like you all that much. And now that the kids aren't here, and we end up with a divorce rate 10% higher than the general public because we've said that's okay. And what no one is telling us is the fact that actually we should spend more time married without kids in the house than we do with kids in the house. But we spend so much energy and time investing in the kids. Guess what? They're leaving, I hope. They're leaving. Here's what return on intention gets us. Return on intention gets us a life of maybe 75 years because we don't focus on our health. But more often than not, and I'm going to tell you, being in the financial services industry, I've seen this more than I want to admit. Marriages don't make it 60, they make it about 30. Especially with the business owners. And here's one of two things happens. One, again, the kids grow up, leave the house. We hit 18, we hit the last kid at 18, we get the kid out of the house, and they look at each other and go, I don't know who you are. I don't know if I like you. And they go separate directions. Divorce, one. Item two is exactly the same path, only it's got more heartache involved. I grow the business to the point that I can finally sell it. I sell the business and there's a huge liquidity event and now there's money. And now that the money is here, the spouse who's not been involved financially goes, you know what, I wasn't sure I could make it on my own, but now that there's money here, if I take half of that, I think I could live my life on my own without this person. So now I've had a financial liquidity event, all this money comes in, now I've got permission to go live a life of freedom without this person I don't know anymore. Which means we don't work 40 years, we work 50. Because we just got divorced and we lost half of what we had. And if we're so focused on our business, what are the unintended consequences with our kids? I mean, our children should probably be dependent on us for maybe 25 years or less. Does that turn into 35 years or more? And so here's what this entire experience, not only watching my own life and playing the movie forward and saying, you know what, if I don't change something, this is where I'm headed. I had a chance to speak yesterday in my accelerator class, and I told them this, I'm gonna tell you too. Anytime you hear me speak, like if you're feeling convicted, like I cannot believe you said that, Eric, know that about 90% of my message is for me. Like I'm talking to me, I'm reminding myself of the promises that I made and the trajectory that I will fall back on if I'm not careful. I am my target audience when I speak. So I went on a journey of discovery and I said, you know what, I'm gonna find out what God has to say about this. Because I know what the world's plan is. The world's plan is fear, scarcity, and protection. What is God's plan? And so I discovered what I call Kingdom ROI, which is return on intention. Kingdom ROI was birthed out of a deep dive study into the verse Matthew 6:33. In Matthew 6:33, Jesus says, seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. Well, what is all these things? Well, if you go and you search the verses up above, basically what he says is, why do you worry about what you're gonna eat or what you're gonna wear or how you're gonna make your next dollar? And I started to realize like all these things, there's the things as a business owner, it's the reason I'm checking my emails, it's all the stuff that I'm worried about. He's promising, I'll take care of all this if you'll seek first my kingdom and my righteousness. Like, okay, if that's the case, what is his kingdom and what is his righteousness? And that's what I've been on a journey for the last 4 years, just studying as much as I can over and over again. What is kingdom? Where does it show up in the Word of God? What is righteousness? Where does it show up in the Word of God? What is God saying about all of this? And I really discovered that what God's plan for our business is actually summed up in the feeding of the 5,000, believe it or not. In the feeding of the 5,000, what we begin to learn about God and about Christ is that God is more concerned with relationships than he is financial outcomes. But when we get to the end of the story, the other thing that we begin to discover is that when we seek first the relationships, God's outcomes exceed anything we could have ever expected. So can I show you how this works? So in the feeding of the 5,000, let's be really careful here first. In the feeding of the 5,000 only includes the men. It does not include the women or the children. So the estimate is there's 7,500 to 10,000 people in attendance. And the disciples come to Jesus, fearful, like us. And what do they say? They say, hey, Jesus, it's getting late, and these people are hungry, and we're not gonna feed them, so why don't you send them away? Like they're already in their heads, like, man, these people are gonna get hungry, they're gonna get angry, frustrated. I mean, we better get them out of here before something happens, right? They're operating out of fear. And Jesus, very calmly, in peace, looks at them and says, you feed them. And what do the disciples start doing? They start looking around in scarcity. Oh my, we don't have any money. What are we gonna do? Oh my. And what does Jesus say to them? He shows them abundance. He's like, well, what do you have? When you look at your business today, are you looking at what you don't have, or are you looking at what you do have? Because when God comes into your business, he doesn't want to know what you don't have. He wants you to work with what you have. So Jesus looks at the disciples and says, what do you have? And then after that he says, then have the people sit down, because he recognizes the abundance of what they were starting with and the miracle that he was able to do. The disciples couldn't do it, but Jesus could. So when it comes to your business, what do you keep trying to do that you need to let go so God can do? And so the people sit down, and the people are fed. And the impact is amazing. Disciples started out trying to protect Jesus from something he didn't need any protection from, because they were in fear and scarcity. And God says, no, if you'll live in my peace and my abundance, there is impact. What are we not talking about? Well, here's what we're not talking about, because for those of you who are financially minded, we need to go back to the fact that results do matter. Yeah, okay, so we started with 5 loaves and 2 fish. We picked up 12 baskets of leftovers. The leftovers were more than what we started with. That's Kingdom ROI. That's return on intention. I can't spend more time at home. I can't work on my marriage. My business needs me. Really? You don't have a business problem. You have a marriage and connection problem. Let me show you what God intended. For this reason, a man shall leave his father and his mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. Let me ask you a question. Are you running your business with half of you? Are you really one when you run your business? What's interesting to me is this has infiltrated the church as well. This idea that we do business over here, we compartmentalize, we do business over here, and we do family and marriage over here, and these two don't get together. I'm gonna give you some proof right now. I'll tell you a couple of stories. About 5 years ago, I was looking at merging my company with another company. My wife's name is Angel. Yes, literally, I married an angel. That is true. Angel and I got on a plane and we flew to Northern California to meet with the owners of this company. The night before, things seemed like they were going well because the owners came to the meal with their spouses. Angel is there. We're having good communication. Everything is good. We're gonna have a more formal meeting the next morning. And they looked at Angel and said, well, what are you doing tomorrow? You wanna go shopping or something? I'm like, excuse me, my wife is here. Angel is not in my business, but Angel is my one. She makes me one. She makes me whole. I don't make a business decision without her. She came to the meeting to be in the meeting. Why? Because sometimes she sees some things I don't see. Sometimes she notices some things that I don't notice. I'm not going into this without being one. I'm not gonna go into a merger halfway. I had another situation about 3 years ago where we had hired a business consultant to help us with some branding. And he had come to my hometown, Covington, Louisiana, which is about an hour north of New Orleans, but it is Mayberry, literally. And he had come to my hometown, and we were sitting down for breakfast, and his first comment to Angel was, I know you don't know what your husband does, but... Excuse me? Both of these were believers. The world tells us you do business over here, compartmentalize, and we do family over here, and God says, no, the two shall become one. Are you doing business halfway? But here's the challenge. So let's acknowledge that there is, God created us differently, but he still created us to be one. So we have to think about how do we do this together. So I like to say in most marriages, in every marriage, there are two CEOs. There is a chief executive officer, which I'm gonna kind of nickname the driver, and there's a chief emotional officer. I'm gonna nickname the champion. Now, this is not in 100% of households, but it is in most households. In most households that I've worked with, the driver is typically the man, the champion is typically the woman, but I have worked with families where they're switched. Here's the driver. The driver drives vision. Here's a challenge for you visionaries. Again, I'm talking to me. Our visions are often more clear in our heads than what we actually say. Like we speak something and we're like, blah, 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 blah. Like, did you understand that? And they go, and they didn't hear any of it. And we think that they've caught, we've got this vision we've been working on for maybe 10 years or 5 years, whatever. We get this vision, this download from God, and we think we've communicated all of it. And then we get into these disagreements. It's like, why don't you understand what I'm saying? I told you about the vision. I didn't hear a word you said. They drive planning. They're typically more financially focused. If we need to get some financial stuff done, it's typically the driver that's gonna do that. But here's the number one problem with us drivers. We like to drive tasks, but our motto is fire, ready, aim. We might miss the opportunity. It might go away, fire. We'll aim later. Okay, that's okay because that's how a lot of things get done. But the challenge you've got to understand is if we're really living in a marriage that is united as one, we're creating disruption on the other side of the marriage. Because the champion champions family, desire to bless the family and others. We're so focused on what's going on in the business that's like, hey, do you realize the fact that you've been in these 2 meetings for the last 2 nights means that you haven't tucked your kids in bed and they miss you? And the fact that you got up early and went to the office and didn't see them before they went to school makes a difference. And if you do that enough, they'll stop talking about it. But it doesn't mean that their heart isn't aching for it. Because they're there, God has put them there to champion the family. They champion simplicity. Your fire-ready aim messes with them. Complexity creates uncertainty. The more fire-ready aim that you do, whether you realize it or not, you're disrupting the rhythm of your relationship. That's why the communication to really do life together is so important. And they champion certainty. Am I going to be okay? I'm not going to speak for everybody out here, but my wife's number one thing is, can you just make sure I'm not a bag lady if something happens to you? I just want to know, am I going to be okay? Because my number one champion is the family, our relationship and the kids. But do you understand this design? Without that, we're operating outside of God's design. We're like the disciples. As drivers, we want to come in, charge in, fire ready, aim, feed these people, or get them out of here because I don't have any way to feed them. And God gave us a champion to slow us down and say, hey, you know what? This is the person who's going to show you how to operate out of peace and out of abundance. The two are made as one flesh. Why? Because if we go fire ready, aim, even if we think we're in God's will, we're doing it halfway. So, husbands, I'm going to speak directly to you. Here's where our intentions need to be. It says in Ephesians 5:25, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. So here's what my wife and a lot of wives have told me are kind of wives' top two needs. Number one, to be loved, to be cherished. I'm just going to check one email when we're having this conversation. Puts a ding in the feeling cherished portion. You're laughing because you've done it. But if you recognized what the capital you're pulling out of that bank account when you do it, your wife's number one need is to be loved, and you think, it's no big deal. You thought I was crazy when I said you had an affair partner. What we've just done is shown that this business email is something that I love. I love this more than I love you. Second need is certainty. And I kind of put this under the idea of simplicity. Certain that what we're doing is really what we're supposed to be doing. And where I've really found this to be, like there are so many times that Angel has come to me and there's a lot of ideas I've had and it's been like, hey, I'm just not certain that this is where we're supposed to go. I hear those words and I'm like, red flag, stop. I don't care how great of an idea this seemed. Because when we go and do things and we do them together, what she wants to know is that we're moving in a direction of certainty. The other thing that I find is in business, sometimes as business grows and evolves, things get to be more and more complex. It's the nature of growing a business. We are in the middle right now, personally, of doing a very specific business transaction that adds a lot of complexity to what we're doing. And when I brought Angel into it, I watched the certainty start to crack. And I said, you know what? We're going to slow down. I still think this is the direction that we need to go, but we're not going to go faster than you're comfortable with. Because I want you to be certain as we go. Why? I could charge on without her. I could go do this, no matter. I mean, it's a great tax benefit. We're going to save a ton of taxes doing this. But is saving taxes more important than my marriage and her certainty? No. Thank you, Ben. Let's turn the attention now. Wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord. This word, again, gets so, I think, misused and like a lot of frustration. as I've really looked at it, what it really comes down to is just respect. And what's interesting about that, we looked at love being a wife's number one need. Guess what a man's number one need is? Respect. If you want to know why God calls you to submit or respect your husband, it's just because guess what? When at the end of the day, there's a great book out there called Love and Respect. I don't know if you know this or not. Do you know that most men, if you ask them if they'd rather be loved or respected, will tell you to give me respect all day long? The number one need of a man is typically not love, but they want to be respected. And the way that this is where we get back into the challenge, right? The measurement of respect in the world is money, which takes us back to return on investment, which is why God gave us our other half. Because without our other half, we'll go chase the money all day long. And we'll sacrifice our marriages and we'll sacrifice everything else along the way. And then the second biggest need of women, is sex. It is number two. We want to feel wanted, we want to feel needed. We want to be the knight in shining armor. We want to be Mel Gibson in all the Mel Gibson movies. We want to be Russell Crowe in Gladiator. And the way that you show that to your spouse is through sex. So go back to this idea that God has created the two to become one flesh. And yet at the same time, we've got the driver personality and the champion personality. And how do we walk this out? We have to be intentional about it. This is not something we can do halfway. And so it starts with relational intention. God is a God of relationship. We've got to pour into the relationship before we pour into anything else. So first is, how do we create connection? How do you actually listen versus just hearing? Angel gets on to me all the time. See, I know you heard me, but were you listening to me? That's what happens when we pull the phone out or our head's somewhere else while we're having a conversation. We're not listening. The most beautiful way that I've found this, and I encourage all couples, is make sure you have a date night. I don't care how old the kids are. Here's the other thing though, that date night, I need to just pull out the night part of it, because do you know when Angel and I go on our date night? We go Wednesday and breakfast. That's our date time. That's one of our intentional times to sit down and connect. So it doesn't have to be at night, but every Wednesday at breakfast. I actually had breakfast with her yesterday morning. Or 2 days, I'm lost on what, today's Friday, it was Wednesday. Are you present versus distracted? Could you actually put your phone away for the night? I mean, do you really believe that there's an email so important that it cannot wait till you till tomorrow morning? I mean, really? Creating intentional family time. One of the things that I did after my experience with why do you hate your family is not only like intentional times, but you guys have noticed we've lost the meal around the table? Well, what I found is my kids were busy at night. We had band practice and choir and theater and everybody's running. Okay, but what are we doing in the morning? Everybody get up, we're having breakfast. So we sit around the table and we would have intentional time. Angel created something she calls attitude of gratitude. So we go around the table. What's your attitude of gratitude this morning? What are you grateful for? Even on the grumpiest day, my kids were forced to come up with something they were thankful for. And then we'd do prayer requests. So we would pray over everyone before they started their day. Vacations. Can you go take a vacation that's not a work trip? Hey, I won this trip to Hawaii. Let's take everybody. I only have to go to these conferences for 4 hours a day every day. We're gonna take the whole family to Hawaii. I'm not talking about that. That's a work trip. Even if you bring your family, don't lie to yourself. That is a work trip. Can you take a vacation? And then my last challenge to you on this is, what if you started every morning in prayer together? This changed my marriage. When I started praying with Angel, she actually told me, she said, I've been asking for this for years, and I'm so glad we're finally doing it. So even this morning, I got up early, I went to the gym, and I called her at like 6:30, and we prayed together before the day started. I've had husbands who are like, hey, well, but my wife sleeps in, or my husband's asleep, or whatever. Wake them up. The deal I get up and I go to the gym really, really early, and then I come back. But the deal in our home is we do not get out of bed to start the day with the family until we've prayed together. What would that do for your relationship? What would that do for your marriage? You actually have to communicate about what you need prayer for that day. And then on the financial side, don't make it so complex. Keep it as simple as possible. From a prosperity standpoint, an abundance standpoint, look at just kind of answering the questions and proving, like these are the things I just help Angel see. Do we have enough to live? Do we have enough to save? Do we have enough to dream? And the evidence of that is in simple cash flows and simple balance sheets. This is not about, hey, let me lay out everything that's going on and here's all the business entities. No. Keep it simple. And then have an exit strategy. What is the plan if you don't wake up tomorrow? Some of you will run businesses together and that might be okay, but I will tell you, Angel's number one thing is like, I don't want to run that thing. And the more entities you keep creating, I really don't want to run that thing. So please make sure there is a plan if you're not here tomorrow. And that feeds into her certainty. And then make sure you're protecting yourself simply, not with complexity. But these are I told you that most of the exits are involuntary. There's 5 of them. It's death, disability, distress, disagreement, and divorce. Those are what we call the 5 dreaded Ds that cause 50% of business exits that are unintended. And then make sure, again, keep it simple, not so much complexity. Make sure you got life insurance, health insurance, income is disability insurance. Make sure you've got business continuity. And then make sure you've got the right legal agreements in place, wills, trusts, buy-sell agreements, powers of attorney. You're gonna have so many people that'll come to you and be like, oh, you need da-da-da-da-da, you need this. At the end of the day, put these things in place. And it's the simplicity of it. Over time, you may need other things, but I go to 75% of business owners don't have any kind of plan. Man, let's start with something that's simple. And you can find somebody who will walk you through this. If you want to talk to us, I've got Russell and our team here, be happy to talk to you about any of this. But here's what I want you to see. And here's what God designed us for. We started out talking about this idea that life is 90 years, marriage of 60 years, the marriage halfway and the children at home for 18 years. We started out talking about this. And I hope what you recognize is if you really want to grow and expand your business, the place that starts is at home. You don't have a business problem. What you have is a marriage and connection problem. When I had that experience 4 years ago, in the time since then, my business has more than doubled. My staffing has more than doubled. We've moved in, like things that we've done have blown my mind. And what did I do? I came home and I started working on my marriage. I didn't come up with any new business strategies. I started connecting more to God. I started connecting more to me, and I started working on my marriage. You think you have a business problem. Quit worrying about your business. Go home and love your wife and kids. And what you will find is it will free you up and open you up to see what's going wrong in the business. The problem that the reason you can't break through on your business is you're so internally broken up on the fact that you're only operating with half of you. And God's trying to get your attention. But do not miss this fact. This is not about this lifetime. Everything that we do echoes through eternity. You're not going to have a business in eternity. This is a temporary thing for you to steward. But the relationships and the people that you meet along the way and the people you impact will matter for eternity. and you are here. And what you also understand is that's a terrible representation of eternity versus now. What you do today echoes through eternity. So before I wrap this up, I just want to share one little thing, because I've had a lot of people like, Eric, this all sounds good. Yeah, I understand, work on my marriage, but I've got tax problems. I got business problems. I got whatever. Okay, calm down for a minute. There are solutions for those, but I'm going to tell you, what if, consider the possibility that the solutions for all of those problems start at home. Like, what does that have to do with tax strategy? I don't know, but maybe praying with your wife, actually God then brings the person who has the tax strategy to you. But for you people who are financial minded, return on intention is better return on investment. So I have been in this business for over 20 years. The gentleman who mentored me in this business did it for another 20 years. So that's where we get, or he did it for 30 years and I knew him for 10. So that's where we get 40 plus years here. These are the financial results of return on intention, of telling people, go home, date your spouse, take care of everything that matters at home, take care of your family, take care of your health, make sure that you're in tune with God's doing in his kingdom. Oh, and by the way, we're gonna save about 12% in taxes versus what you paid the year before. We reduce about 60% of capital gains taxes, 90% reduction in estate taxes, 20% of inheritance moved into lifetime, meaning what would it look like if your kids actually got money while they needed it as opposed to waiting until you kick the bucket? Where you could be in relationship with them and pass not only wisdom, but the wealth at the same time. 422% increase in lifetime generosity. What could you do more for the kingdom for if you knew you could give more? Do you know most families have the capacity to increase their giving by 5 to 10 times what they give right now? Do you know why they don't do it? Because no one's told them they can. People hold on to wealth because of fear, scarcity, and protection. And the people in the financial industry are like, oh, you may not have enough, you may not And they don't give them permission to look at it through a kingdom lens and say, no, if we engage with God's kingdom here and here, you know what, you actually could increase your giving. Guess why they don't want you to increase your giving? They don't make any money when you increase your giving. 422% increase in lifetime generosity. What is God calling you to do for the kingdom that you need to be doing now? And 1,086% increase in total generosity. Oh, all of this while at the same time still growing family wealth by about 16.43% annually. That's not an investment conversation. That's people still running businesses and doing everything else that God's calling them to do. God, when you start to get aligned with what he's doing, he just opens up the floodgates of heaven. So Kingdom ROI. What would it look like in your life, in your marriage, if you trusted him and said, you know what, I want more peace. I recognize that God is a God of abundance because I want to seek first his kingdom and his righteousness because he's going to take care of everything else. So that's where I'm going to end things today. But if what I've talked about, it's like, I want to know more. I want to understand more about this. I have a program I've put together called the Kingdom ROI On Demand Accelerator. It's 2 free 35-minute training videos that come straight to your inbox. If this QR code doesn't work, we've had some trouble on the screen. If the QR code doesn't work, go to it works? Okay. ericl360.com. It's also on there and you can click the link. If you're gonna do this, watch these with your spouse. Don't watch these alone. When we did the full day accelerator yesterday, it was amazing to me the amount of spouses that came up to me and said, you're reading my mail. You're reading the things that I've been saying but haven't been talking about. Husbands, I want you to listen to that. I just haven't said anything, but that's how I've been feeling. 2 free videos, and see if even those videos don't change your perspective on why you need to be more invested in your marriage. You don't have a business problem. But God is ready to heal your marriage. And God wants the two of you to be one. And what if everything that you want to do for the kingdom, everything that you dream of at night, everything that you think of at night, what if the separation, what if the gap between that is you just recognizing, look, I gave you a partner that has the other side of the vision, you just haven't asked them yet. You haven't invited them in. So thank you so much for your time. I wish God's blessings on you. It's been great.
We hope you were encouraged by today's session. You can support Ignite's mission to empower Christian business leaders through free resources, intentional community, and strategic growth by heading to ignite-cb.com/support. Thank you for being with us today. And remember, the best is yet to come.